Hello, this is Angela from Advice Resolutions, and today we're here filming outside of Jedburgh Sheriff Court. Today we're going to talk about something that's very close to my concerns, which is that the legal aid system is very slowly eradicating because there's not enough money to bolster to protect people who are accused of a crime in the criminal justice system. So what does that mean? Does that mean that you're not going to get a fair hearing? Does that mean you won't be able to go before a competent tribunal or an impartial tribunal? Or at least we believe it's impartial and they're being fair and independent. So if there's not enough money in the criminal justice system, what does that mean for the person who is relying on getting justice? It looks like the Procurator Fiscal in Scotland is getting more money because there's less money for the accused person in criminal cases. And if there isn't enough money, that means that your liberty's at stake. You don't have access to natural justice, and you face potentially being imprisoned for a crime you didn't commit. So I presume that what's happening here is that the less money being made available for the criminal justice system for defendants is diminishing, and there's a ploy to try and get people to admit that they've committed a crime when they clearly haven't, just to keep the peace, and so that they don't get embroiled in a long drawn out criminal case. Well, that's totally unfair. Why should that be? If you are innocent, you need to prove that innocence, and you need the legal backing to do so. Our understanding is that there are about 13,000 lawyers, and there are only 1,000 practicing receiving legal aid, and the balance does seem to be struck there, in my understanding, and things need to change. Drastic things need to change. There needs to be an overhaul of the criminal justice system's legal aid system, because if you can't get access to justice, it clearly means that the system is skewed in the favour more of the Procurator Fiscal in Scotland. So the answer is give more, give a balanced sum to the Procurator Fiscal system so that they can survive and they can do their job to protect the public. There's also making sure you give enough money so people can, fight their corner and access to justice is served. And also Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights is covered. Because if you don't have that fundamental right to access justice, does human rights actually exist? There's a European Convention in the UK actually exists, because it doesn't. It's a facade. And, is it an illusion? Is it an illusion? So I think that we have to consider very carefully that if we want to maintain the status quo of inaccess to justice, then we continue the way we are, or we can, on the other side, we can attempt to try and balance everything so that there is access to justice. Because all of these cases they've got now lined up, waiting to be heard, there is a backlog. And is that, realistic? It's not. If you allow people access to lawyers, things get settled better. People understand their rights. There is compliance with the European Convention on Human Rights, remembering that Scotland cannot enact legislation that goes against human rights. Maybe England can, but Scotland cannot do this. So all the time people are left without, defence lawyers. It's actually a breach of their rights. And in actual fact, Scotland is in breach of these rights, and Scotland is probably considered acting illegally. And that definitely needs an overhaul. So if we get people from the ECHR, the European Convention, to actually witness and observe what's going on in Scotland, I wonder what they would think about the criminal justice system here, whereby cases are just mounting up, cases are piling high, and nothing is being moved on because of the fact that people can't get lawyers. Trying to find a lawyer, an advocate in Scotland, is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Where is that needle? Impossible. A lot of cases can't get heard because lawyers are simply just burnt out, they're tired, and apparently they're only earning about £20 an hour by the time they've had all their disbursements and outlays. Now, which lawyer in their right mind is going to, act for £20 an hour? They're professional, they've got the skilled craft, they've been to university for 4 years, and they've also had to study their craft and their trade for a significant number of years and be supervised for this. So the criminal justice system, is it fit for purpose? Well, simply the answer is no, it is not fit for purpose, because it doesn't serve the purpose that it's supposed to, which is access. It's supposed to be fair. There's supposed to be the correct balance. You're supposed to get access to advice and representation within a reasonable time. And you're supposed to actually have that representation. Can you imagine going up against a Procurator Fiscal in Scotland and having no representation and just running the case yourself, a criminal case, in their courts? And facing a battery of information, a battery of legal arguments, and not knowing which way to argue your case, that is clearly not acceptable. No one in their right mind would want to take on a Procurator Fiscal, and no system should enable that to happen whereby you're not a trained qualified lawyer or advocate. They have to permit, and it is your legal right to access a lawyer, an advocate, within a reasonable time, so that you have the right representation at the right time for the right reason, and so that your liberty is not affected. Remember, your liberty is all part of the European Convention, so you must not have your liberty violated. That's very important. So where is the legal aid system going now? Well, nobody knows. All we know, it's in disarray. It's in a shambles, it's a sham, and we need to do something about it. We need to do something really radical. We need to have a serious overhaul of the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system needs a pair of eyes on it, and it needs people to seriously consider the direction it's going to go in, because nobody should be up against any criminal justice system, Procurator Fiscal, any Scottish courts and tribunal on their own as a litigant in person in a case in which they've been told they're criminally liable, and it's not a simple case. It's complicated in most cases, and it's not straightforward. So why on earth would the court system force a person to undertake a criminal justice case in their name as a litigant in person without the right qualified people to assist them to do so? Well, that simply won't work. It doesn't wash. It doesn't work, and it's not workable. So I'm thinking in my mind that the criminal justice system isn't fit for purpose, for sure, and there needs to be a serious thought about whether or not people need to be considering to get solicitors from other jurisdictions in England, perhaps. Will they permit this? Will they change it? Where can you draw in the qualified, skilled people to help with this sham, this mess? Is it cross-jurisdictional? Well, laws in Scotland and England and Wales are all different, so clearly a lawyer in Scotland probably can't practice in England, vice versa. It all depends on their qualification. So let's watch this space. Let's be patient and see what happens, and then consider that nobody in their right mind is going to want to run a case in this court, Jedburgh Sheriff Court, where I'm standing outside, with the view that they're going to take on the police, the judges, the court system, and perhaps hope that they're going to win, because clearly that is a huge risk, and a risk that nobody should begin to even want to take on. But stay tuned for our next instalment of Legal Aid, the criminal justice system, Jedburgh Sheriff Court, and look after yourselves and have a great day.